Welcome back to the Tech and Real Estate Podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce Pablo Delgado, an experienced real estate investor and tech entrepreneur. Pablo has a unique background combining his data expertise with real estate investing to create innovative tools for lead generation. In this episode, you'll learn how Pablo went from working a 9-to-5 job to building a powerful data-driven solutions that help real estate investors find deals faster. We'll dive into his journey, how he leveraged technology like web scraping and AI, and what the future holds for his growing business. Let's get started. Hey, Pablo, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here.
Hey, Ariel. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, super excited.
Yeah, you have a really interesting background because not only are you an investor, but you've built tools along the way. But before we dive into that, would love to hear a bit about your experience, your background. Were you always looking to do real estate or did you start in a different place?
No, actually, no, I think real estate was one of those conversations that, specifically with colleagues or just, that one uncle that's always talking about, real estate, but no one ever really sort of showed me how to do it, right? So it didn't really resonate. And it wasn't until maybe 2020 when the pandemic started that I just had a lot of, free time outside of my, 9 to 5. And I kind of started getting, interest in doing a bit of like quote unquote side hustles. So I have a goal to, I'm trying to hit FIRE or do the financial independent retire early bit. And that led me into real estate wholesaling. And I attempted to do real estate wholesaling during the pandemic, but I quickly realized that obviously you need marketing money and you need to invest, right? And I realized that a lot of the platforms were getting their data from, the county appraisal district. And so basically I have a bit of a data background. So I was thinking, you know what, let me put this data together in the database. So that's kind of how my journey started of one, just, finding out through YouTube. And I do know someone personally that started wholesaling and they kind of sold me into the idea. And, but as I digress, and that's kind of how I got into it. I by building the data and, just starting kind of my journey.
That's great. You mentioned a very similar path that a lot of people take is they have their 9 to 5, they're possibly comfortable in it, but they want to look for potentials for other streams of income, right? In case their job were to go away, or maybe they could retire early. So you have your hands into different areas, and particularly real estate is one of those that keeps popping up for you. But you notice something that I feel like a lot of newbies don't notice at first is that wholesaling, even though it could be marketed as a $0, startup costs, usually there is a higher cost for the marketing aspect. And was that like a shock to you when you first noticed that, or were you a little bit prepared for it?
Yeah, no, especially I think the first time I must have pulled like, let's say, 5,000 records and then skip traced them. So by that, and then at that point, I think a lot of us want to make sure, you jump straight into registering your LLC, et cetera. So I want to say within the first 4 months or so, I had spent, I would say, a good $2,000. And it was, and unfortunately, it wasn't fruitful. And I got, to practice cold calling and gotten a lot of rejections and, obviously a lot of upset folks. And to your point, I realized that when it comes to real estate, specifically wholesaling, I mean, data is king. So that's why I realized, there is a lot of money to be made here. So there's opportunities there. And I kind of shifted in that direction instead into the data. Yeah. But definitely not free. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, before we dive into the data itself, what is the actual problem or like goal for a wholesaler? What are you looking to solve? And what are some of the data points that you're looking to retrieve? So you did mention like county records as well as skip tracing. What are these things for someone who might be a newbie?
I think one of the primary things is just, let's say I'll step back a bit because I think the traditional bit is you're driving through your neighborhood and you're identifying sort of, properties that may look vacant, et cetera. So I think a lot of people are always sort of have a big question mark and like who owns that property, right? So I think if you're in whatever neighborhood you're at, driving around, determine that there's a potential property that, could be for investment. The primary thing is like who owns it, right? And people don't realize that, all that information may be available in the county appraisal records. Every state is a bit different, and every county is different. Not all of them are, first free, and second, because of different privacy laws and whatnot, they're not all readily available, right? But as far as just the general, just of what is a wholesaler attempt, what are they trying to accomplish, right? They're trying to find investment opportunities, right? Typically, they would have a buyer, right? So you have an investor that has the capital. You're acting as, I would say you're more of a finder. So yeah, your role is sort of not necessarily the middle person, but you're identifying a distressed property that could be sold. Typically, you want it to buy it at a discount, right? For it to make sense. I guess when I say a discount is more, so it makes sense to your buyer and also for you to make some cash out of it, right? And that's sort of the finder's fee, as I would call it. So yeah, in short, trying to identify distressed property, trying to solve a problem, because a lot of times the future seller may have difficulties in actually selling it through a traditional way, because the property may have, a lot of, it needs improvement. And obviously a lot of times, depending on the people's financial or just general life situation, they may not have enough money to sort of remodel it and then put it on the MLS, right, for it to be sold. So I think that's the main thing. If you're a wholesaler, honestly, you should be looking to solve people's problems on determining what someone's situation is, and then working with them to sort of maximize sort of the I want to say the opportunity for everyone, right? I think wholesaling also gets a bit of a negative rep, because I think there's a lot of people that may try to take advantage of situations, especially of people's financial situations or civil situations as well. So yeah, do your best to be ethical. And yeah, especially if you're running it as a business, like, you should be ethical.
Exactly. Be ethical, but it is an important space to solve problems where listing, like you said, on the MLS isn't possible. If we go on Zillow, we usually see quartz countertops, these really nice properties, but not everyone has the financial means or ability to do so, and may need to sell their property immediately. So in this aspect, you now understand wholesaling, you've gathered some data by leveraging what's already out there, but you're not satisfied. And you're thinking, I can probably solve this aspect of gathering information and possibly reaching out to these property owners using more informed data. So what are your first steps that you take to do so?
Specifically my data, one of the things that I realize is there's a lot of, I don't want to say competition, but there is a lot of people, specifically, and depending on your market, right? For me, it was Houston, Texas. It's very tough. So it's very difficult to find those opportunities, especially if you're using more commercial solutions, right? Everyone sort of pulling the same absentee owners list, et cetera. So everyone seems to be targeting the same way. So I think I looked the other way of, what niche data is there available, right? And I started looking into, complaint data, started looking into sort of court, other types of information that sort of gave me a bit of a lead. And that's kind of what I focus on. So I kind of looked the other way and focused more on the niche data aspect. And I think that kind of yielded better results for me. Although I won't lie, I didn't really stuck around doing the wholesaling as much, but I just kind of shifted it to the data, because that became, really excited. And, but yeah, same kind of story for some of my customers. I think a lot of them, they want to just find that niche data, and they tend to get better results. So, as far as like feedback, I'm very happy to hear the results.
It's a great point that you mentioned as well, is that if you have everyone using the same exact lead sources, that individual who's a homeowner, maybe they recently went through a divorce, they may get sent messages 20 times, right? And so how do you actually stand out in that aspect? You might not be able to if you don't have a lot of money. So what you can do is look for other lists to find motivated sellers, or you're able to get that same list, but in a faster way. So when you were looking at being able to retrieve this data, Was there certain programming languages you use? Were you learning to do this for the first time? Like, how familiar were you with trying to extract information online?
During university, I took a database class, and I think I took it for 1 year. So I had never used sort of that, whether it's SQL or just general relation database until then. So years later, it's like, you know what? I think I put this data together. So I put in practice, I guess, more of that SQL side of the house. And then I've been in my sort of day to day, I use PowerShell or Python. So I realized that I could, just sort of apply these use cases of, as far as like the web scraping or just general. So I guess just those two specific programming languages has been very helpful.
Got it. So instead of having to actually go manually to a website, copy information down, which could be prone to errors, you were able to programmatically extract this data. And how did you start with getting clients and realizing like, oh, this is an opportunity where I can actually scale this out versus it being a one-time project?
Yeah, so a lot of it was attending events. So initially, I think that the primary thing was doing face-to-face events of local real estate events, and then just sort of first initially asking sort of, hey, what is it that you do, right? Because real estate is very broad, right? And a lot of times you may be dealing with people that focus on commercial, other people, single family and whatnot. So I think first steps was to understand people's pain points. And a lot of it was that, like, whatever providers that we're using, they weren't having great success because, like you mentioned, by the time they reached out, 15 other people had sort of called. And so I think the first thing was attending these events, kind of hearing the pain points, and then starting to capitalize on that of like, okay, I need to build a platform in which solves their problems, right? And specifically, like I said, sort of niche list, and also what people call like fresh data. So, a lot of, depending on the platforms that people use, they tend to be who knows how often they refresh them, right? So the accuracy bit of it is one of the things that I think some of our customers have mentioned that that's what they like about us. But yeah, it's one of the things I miss attending physical events because it's a bit tougher doing it now virtually. Yeah.
So Pablo, you're telling me that you actually went outside of your computer and went physically in person to meet with people to understand their pain points.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a shocker, right? Yeah. And I mean, I would encourage anyone, like specifically in your own market, right? I know nowadays is very sort of popular to watch YouTube shorts or TikToks where people are talking about virtually wholesaling or just virtually, sort of investing, right? But one of the best things you could do is just attend your local RIA or any event, develop those connections, right? And basically just learn to listen, because a lot of times people will sort of bring up their pain points, and I tend to use those as opportunities because sometimes they're the experts in that field, right? I'm an expert in my own field, but yeah, I tend to listen to them, and it turns out it has been fruitful.
Such amazing value. Networking is so powerful, especially in real estate. And for anyone listening who's an aspiring data analyst, data scientist, wants to develop solutions, this is how you do it. It's learning those programmatic skills, but it's actually listening to the problems that are currently happening and then looking to solve them. So now at this stage, you're looking to actually solve these problems. You're building some software out. How did you actually get this into some sort of product or in a systematized way that you were able to then repetitively use to help others?
Yeah, so it was really tough. And I think it wasn't until ChatGPT came around and so again, I have, decent background in data and whatnot. So, but I didn't know, I was not a web developer. So I'm still don't consider myself a web developer. But for the first 2 years, what we used to do is basically a basic form. You would fill it out, what kind of, asset type, absentee own, whatever years of ownership, etc. So it was very primitive in the sense that you had to fill out a form. We'll get an email. we fulfill the request, send you the data, invoice, etc. So for the longest, I wanted to move away from that, but obviously there was a lot of technical limitations. And yeah, it wasn't until ChatGPT came around that I've sort of started, figuring out how to build a lot of this from scratch. And yeah, we eventually turned it into a subscription-based model. So now a lot of it is self-service and basically monthly. It's like a monthly membership cost, and that's kind of how we're dealing with it. But yeah, initially, it was a very difficult. It was very difficult to fulfill the requests, especially if they were coming in, in the middle of the night, or I'm in London now, so the time difference, I was worried that I was going to hurt my customers as far as the how fast we can get back to them. So, yeah, thankfully we're at a better stage now.
Yeah, it's a really great point that you mentioned, how you were able to leverage ChatGPT to really be able to expand your technical skills. And even though you don't call yourself a web developer, the fact that you've been able to systematize a process for that is outstanding. I think that's also a misconception that folks have, is that once you're technical, you know everything. But it's very similar to, say, like if you're rehabbing a house. A plumber skill set, very different from a roofer, very different from the person who's doing tiling. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just like anything, it's technology, etc. It's very broad, so you end up finding sort of that niche that interests you. And yeah, to your point, I had my first rehab during COVID, which took me 6 months, and I was being very sort of prideful. um, in the past, my brother-in-laws, they work in construction, so they helped me build an apartment. But this particular property that I purchased, I never wanted to ask anyone for help, and a lot of it was just through YouTube. But there were very specific things that I would not touch, and that's plumbing and electric. So for those, I needed to reach out to experts because I didn't feel comfortable. So to your point, just like, whether you're a technologist and whatnot, it's very broad, right? Whether you're a front end, back end developer, focus on data, there's very specific niches. And that's why, that's the beauty of life in general. Everybody tends to be an expert in their own fields. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in the same topic of breadth of, different types of roles in tech, but now shifting over to different types of maybe data someone would want or use cases they have for leads. Could you go into a bit more detail of how your product works today in order to get someone leads? Like, for example, if I was an investor in Houston, Texas, and I wanted to be able to start marketing towards distressed homeowners, how would I use your product to do so?
Sure. So there's two products that we have. One of them is more, I guess you could say, is closer to like PropStream or list source, in which we can kind of customize your criteria. So I think one of the beauty of working with different customers is that you get different use cases. So one of my favorite use cases is, if someone has had their property for a while and they're looking, let's say, to retire, right? Let's say if someone's over 65 and they live in a 2-story property, right? A lot of times they may be looking down to downsize because of those potential difficulties. So there are specific use cases that you could kind of play with our data, our filters, and then a lot of that has been very fruitful for some of our customers. There is, yeah, and I think one of the primary things is, again, because we work directly with some of the data sources, it's a lot quicker than a lot of the bigger vendors. And we're a small shop, but I think we've done a great job in just specializing. But I guess that's just one of various examples of some of the how you can get creative as the investor, and then like again. For us, we just go based on the feedback and make it easy for the investor. Or if needed, I could just, you can kind of verbalize and tell me. I'm kind of like ChatGPT. You give me the prompt and we put the data together for you. And we say, hey, this is sort of an Excel or a CSV ready for you to sort of, take it and skip trace it.
Got it. And then who's your ideal customer? Is it someone who has been in real estate for several years, has already a pipeline that they're working with and wants to enhance it? Is it those who are in residential versus instead of commercial? What is an ideal user type?
I think my ideal user is someone who has their business in real estate, and they have a good amount of marketing money. Only because I've noticed two types of clients. There's people that may watch a YouTube video like this, and they may want to sign up for just free trials, etc. So they never truly become long-term customers. Versus someone who has, a reputable company, and this is sort of their main bread and butter. So I would say someone with a, I don't want to say legitimate business, but someone who obviously this is their, real estate is their life, and a lot of it. I mean, various customers. I think that's just primary it, but yeah, it ranges from single family to multi-land, vacant land, or commercial property. So I think those are all my ideal customers, but it's primary someone who's a full-time investor. Yeah.
Perfect. Super useful. And is your data solely for Houston, or do you expand to other regions as well?
The product that I mentioned that's close to like more what most people are familiar with, that's primary Texas and Florida. The other product that I can talk to in a bit, virtual driving for dollars, that one's in over 50 cities. So we cover a good amount of states. I think most of the most populous states. And that one specifically, we focus on the top sort of most populated cities. And so it truly allows you to drive for dollars in which you can physically see like a distressed property and sort of get an idea of the conditions, because a lot of times, I don't know if this is a good time to share the screen. I can kind of walk through it, or I can talk through it as well.
Yeah, so let's talk through it. First, let's start with driving for dollars. What is it? Because when I hear driving for dollars, I think I'm going in a car and I'm just seeing money pour out from the skies.
Actually, this is really exciting because to my knowledge, nothing like this exists in the marketplace. But basically, I think so. Virtually driving for dollars is just a coin that I guess is a term that I coined. May exist out there, but I think people mean different things, right? So, for me specifically, virtually driving for dollars is being able to sign in to your computer or your mobile device, and then being able to, whether it's you or your virtual assistant, maybe type a zip code or a certain area that you want to see if there's, distressed properties, right? So for us, we join, the sort of the county appraisal data, and we join any other things like, their tax delinquencies. But most importantly, we also crowdsource a lot of the complaints that people make. So, for example, neighbors tend to be very verbose, and they tend to want to keep their communities, clean. I guess I should say that in the way that they're going to report everything. So if you haven't cut your grass, or even if you're a tenant and the landlord isn't taking care of the property, there's a roof that's leaking, etc. So basically we aggregate all that data, and now we also have the ability to pull pictures. So basically on a daily, you'll log in to whatever city. It could be, Arizona, Florida, Texas, California, etc. And you'll be presented with a list of properties that have a description. And you can also search based on, terms like high grass or vacant, or, maybe there's vagrants or there's squatters, anything really that you can think of that someone in that community would complain about. That's sort of the information that we're showing you. And that's sort of why we're calling it, virtual driving for dollars, because if you're visually driving, right, there's certain things that you would pay attention to, and a lot of that would be, it's pretty much represented in our platform. So that's what we're calling it, driving for dollars. A lot of people, I think, that claim to do virtual driving for dollars, I think what they do is they just use Google images from Street View, and they're quite outdated. So we don't do that. Just wanted to make it very clear. So I think that's the main thing. And from the feedback that I gotten, it helps investors to zone into specific areas, as you would physically drive, you probably have a certain route that you want to follow. It kind of mimics that, but obviously you're getting a really good insight of the property conditions, etc. So if you do get in touch with the property, owner, you kind of have an idea of the conditions already. So once you get to the stage of negotiating, you can better offer, make your offer more accurate and kind of determine the ARV a little bit easier. So I think that's the biggest sort of value that we're providing.
I love to hear it. There's so many times in real estate where there's a lot of data solutions, but they're not current. And you mentioned a key aspect in that virtual for driving for dollars has a lot of different meanings. And the one that probably comes up the most is just going on Google Maps, looking at properties and doing that endlessly for hours. But as you said, that can be outdated. So the fact that you're bringing in extra data that can help to kind of get a picture of how the neighborhood is today and what are some distressed properties is super valuable. Are you using natural language process?
Because there's obviously, it depends on the cities, right? Like Houston, Dallas, Miami, etc. Like they're huge cities. So on a daily basis, there's thousands of complaints. So what we're doing is we're looking for specific keywords, like I mentioned. So to make it a little bit easier for, our customer to just go on the platform and identify, okay, yeah, this particular one, there's an issue with the roof. No one has picked up the mail in like so long. Or even people would say, hey, the neighbor passed away 3 months. No one's taking care of the property, or, there's so much data that we sort of filtered through. And yeah, we specifically look for keywords. Now the interesting bit is that just like the ChatGPT use case that there's always ideas that you have, but something happens at some point, in your stages of life that, there's a light bulb moment. So for me, I've always wanted to integrate the images, but the problem is that your neighbor may report an issue, let's say with the high grass, but they will end up uploading a picture of the president or the vice president or the former president or something that has nothing to do with the property, right? So at that point, I got into sort of the LLM models. So basically applying AI, right? So I started sort of looking into the open source area of AI, and I'm running a lot of those images through the trained models to basically just identify, true positives and sort of removing anything that has nothing to do with the property. So now that allowed me to automate all that process, right? And basically all my automations are just Python scripts kicking off in like, schedule task or cron, depending on your your background, Linux, Windows. Yeah. So that was a big eye opening, and just really excited because it opens a lot of other possibilities. Like now we're not only dealing with real estate, but we're also helping construction companies like roofing companies. There's exterminators and whatnot, because again, tenants will report issues with the property, and obviously there is a level of urgency. So another way that we're kind of leveraging the LLM is sentiment analysis. So running those complaints and sort of identifying those in which people are very upset and whatnot, right? So I think since all of those lead eventually to like code violations, there is an incentive for the property owner to address those issues. Otherwise, they're going to pay fines from the city. So again, lots of complaints, but our use cases are around the driving for dollars bit.
Excellent. Love how you're incorporating AI and how you may not be originally an AI expert yourself, but by leveraging, ChatGPT, LLMs, open source, you're able to integrate this within your product, and also by getting that feedback from customers.
Yeah, and another thing I want to say is I think now AI is a synonym to ChatGPT, but you can basically, for me, I'm looking into, so there's things like Olama or Hugging Face. So there's companies like Salesforce, Meta. All these companies already invested, millions of dollars and also thousands of hours of GPU of trained models, which are readily available for you. So if whatever use case you're interested in, whether that's text to speech, vision, like image processing, sentiment analysis, those are available for you. And obviously there's a lot of Python transformers or scripts that you can leverage, right? So I know a lot of times for me, one of my concerns is I think a lot of people share everything with ChatGPT and OpenAI, and I'm very sort of protective of my data, so I don't want to continue asking it, right? So you can host those models, or in simpler terms, you could basically save those LLMs locally in your computer, and you can create your own versions of ChatGPT as chatbot or do your own use cases. So when I talk about AI, I mean, there's a lot of this big world outside of ChatGPT, but I know ChatGPT is sort of the most, I guess people are used to it now, right? And they're kind of leveraging how they would use it as Google, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's really powerful that there's a lot of solutions available. Like back in the day, in order to train an AI model on images, you may need thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of images, all classified. Where it's like, where are you going to get the time or money to label each of these images? But now, like you said, by leveraging some of these other large companies that have already done that work and have already processed these models so that you could just download it locally and be able to utilize it right away is super powerful. So would love to transition a bit into who is the current customer for this product? Do you find that it's mostly wholesalers? I know you mentioned those who are in construction, and also who do you see maybe as a target customer that you haven't acquired yet?
So current ones are mainly wholesalers and then realtors as well. The construction bit of it that's been more ad hoc, that I'm trying to do a bit of more sales and like, hey, can I help you in lead generation for your roofing company and whatnot. But yeah, primarily wholesalers. And I think in the future I would want to do more B2B. So I think we have this large data sets that we've sort of curated over the years, and I think in the future I would love to be able to put this data in sort of like a API format, so that way we can feed into other platforms like Coffee Closer, and just be able to give you a sort of more of a ground level view of what's happening.
It's perfect. Yeah, being able to take it to the next level in the future as an API could definitely provide a lot of value. Be able to plug into different areas, like say go high level. I know a lot of wholesalers and investors use that as well. But I do want to take a bit of a step back and ask you, Pablo, you have done so much in such a short span of time, in only several years, of being able to build a business, scale it, and even create a whole entire product outside of the original lead system that you were developing. So with your prior experience for 9 to 5, were you doing things related to like working with a lot of customers, or how did you like basically take your experience from working 9 to 5 to what you've built over the last several years?
Yeah, my background's been always sort of IT. I started fairly young, and I always call it the something along the evolution of an IT person. So I started doing the help desk, desktop support, a system admin, and then cybersecurity. So I've been doing cybersecurity for the last 12 years. But I think a part of that translated is you're always kind of analytical. So I think I've been able to see in the past, analyzing data, seeing trends, and just I think identifying specific sort of opportunities when there's something in security called well, I'm blanking a bit. So you get pretty good at finding data, right? And when you're investigating sort of let's say anomalous activity, you tend to find the root cause, right? So I think I took the same approach of finding that I knew that there's open data out there, whether it's which there is a lot of open data for each city, right? You can literally type city name, open data. There's tons of things that I think I started leveraging for the real estate use case, but obviously you can use them for any other thing if you're a researcher and whatnot. But yeah, I think the primary thing is just being able to spot sort of those opportunities within data is sort of what I think my 9 to 5 has sort of influenced me. And obviously learning the PowerShell, Python, and a few other things to automate a lot of processes that I used to do in my day to day. So I think those are two of the primary sort of factors that helped in here. So same sort of technology, apply different use cases. So now I think I've just the way I kind of perceive life is like I like to get into conversations with people with different backgrounds, and again, once you learn to listen, you'll realize, you know what, that sounds like an interesting challenge. I think I could help you there. So
I love to hear it. Yes, I agree with you. The analytical aspect that you had, technical, and then also, like you said, being able to listen, being able to be a good communicator, which is about understanding people's problems and then being able to kind of think about them and draw a solution from it. So with that, Pablo, I would love to hear what you see the future for yourself. I know you plan to continue building these businesses. Do you also look to build your portfolio? Are you looking to get closer to FIRE? What's in store for the future?
I think now, like I mentioned, I think our primary goal is sort of, I want to become work optional. So I think you're where I'd like to be, to become sort of a full-time entrepreneur if I can. But obviously London is very expensive and I do miss my family every once in a while. So I think the primary thing would just be to a point where, our finances aren't being hurt as much and we're able to do a little bit more flexible with our time. And as far as my portfolio, yes, I like to buy a flat here in London. And also, we recently spent a month in Mexico City, and I love the city. So I think I'd like to buy an investment property there. So I'm also trying to learn about sort of the real estate market there. But yeah, long term, 4 properties at least, and then maybe get some rental income from that. But I think the primary thing is just right now is reinvesting into the business and being able to get some full-time folks under our belt and go from there.
That is excellent. And wow, Mexico City, maybe a flat in London. Who knows? Maybe doing data solutions overseas as well.
Yeah, I'm also trying to learn the market here because it's very different. And obviously, there's a lot of barriers in terms of data privacy and whatnot. So it's not as easy as it is in the US. So if you're in the US, you have it very easy, I think, in my opinion, right? And it's always a changing landscape. So who knows how, as far as like privacy laws and whatnot, how long that's going to remain like that. So I think I do see that there's a window of opportunity that I'm taking advantage of at the moment. And I think that's going to close in the next few years. So definitely take advantage of the current situation.
100%. And Pablo, for those that want to reach out to you, how would they do so to learn more about the services you provide and follow your journey?
Sure. I'm in lspdata.io is one of them. And the other platform that we have is virtual drive for the number $4.com. And just in general, I have a sort of a Calendly link there. So if you want to jump on a call just to discuss ideas and whatnot, I'm always open to find another co-founder. So if you're that co-founder who's interested in finding partnerships, feel free to reach out. But in general, I tend to hang around bigger pockets and Reddit. So I think in Reddit, I've answered quite a bit of questions out there, and I provided a lot of value. So I think my username is Pablo Delgado there. So yeah, I'm pretty open book, and like to be transparent about this thing. So.
Excellent. Super excited, Pablo, to continue following your journey. We may have you back on to see a live demonstration of your app as well. So those watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below if that's something you'd like to see. And with that, thank you so much, Pablo, for your time.
No, thank you for inviting me.